Hey guys, Landon Trop here, and in this video we're going to be looking at 12 column layouts with Flexbox. In a 12 column layout, the page is broken apart into 12 invisible columns. These columns have a small amount of space between them, called gutters. The page is divided into rows, and the containers in the rows take up a certain number of columns. So what you're looking at here is a boilerplate system called Skeleton. Skeleton includes a grid system along with it. So you can see here that this row has one container taking up 4 columns and another container taking up 8 columns. If you start to look for them, you'll see 12 column layouts everywhere. Take the Heroku landing page, for example. If we scroll down the page, you can see here that we have 3 containers in this section, each one of them taking up a third of the total width of the website. So in a 12 column grid system, each one of these would be 4 columns wide. Below that, you have 2 containers, each taking up half of the total width of the website. So here, you would have 2 containers spanning 6 columns. Down at the bottom here, each one of these highlighted sections would take up 2 columns. And this subscribe section over here would take up 4. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use the Flex Grow, Flex Shrink, and Flex Basis properties to build 12 column layouts without the need for a library like Skeleton. So let's say you have 3 columns, and you want each one of those columns to take up a third of the container. So by default, the section element is going to take up 100% of the width of the container. Let's limit this element's width to 740 pixels. While we're at it, we'll also add gutters around each one of the columns. So the first step to breaking this section into 3 columns is to make it a flex container like we did in Chapter 1. By default, Flexbox sets the widths of the columns to the size of their content. You can change this behavior by using the Flex Grow and the Flex Shrink properties. The Flex Grow property tells Flexbox how to grow the items to take up additional space. Flex Shrink tells Flexbox how to shrink the item when it's run out of space. Most of the time, you want these to be the same, so you'll often see them with the same value. In our case, we'll set them both to 1. The Flexbox container now fills up 3 columns, but why? The values for Flex Grow and Flex Shrink are proportional, meaning they change relative to the other items in the Flex container. So since we have 3 items, and each one of them has a Flex Grow and a Flex Shrink of 1, each item takes up a third of the total container. What happens if one of the columns has a different value? So now the first column takes up roughly the same amount of space as the second 2 columns put together. That's because if we add up the values for all 3 columns' Flex Grow properties, we would get 4. So the first column would take up 2 out of 4, or 1/2 of the total space, and the other columns take 1 out of 4, or 1/4 of the total space. So if you look closely, you'll notice that the first column doesn't quite cover half the container. If you add more content to the third column, you can really see the problem. So what's going on? Why is Flexbox not working correctly? Well, it turns out that Flexbox doesn't distribute space evenly to each column. It figures out how much space each column starts with, which is specified by the Flex Basis property. Then, the remaining space is distributed using the Flex Grow and Flex Shrink properties. This might seem confusing, and that's because it is. The way this stuff adds up is really complicated. But don't worry, you don't need to understand the nuances to use Flexbox. Since we don't care how much space the content originally takes up, we'll set the flex basis property to 0. And there you go, it works. Well, kind of. There's one more thing to fix. If you add another row below the first row, you can see the problem. So why don't the columns line up? It's because Flexbox includes the padding, border, and margin in the basis when it calculates how big the item should be. The first and second columns in the second row have 22 pixels between them, but the first column of the first row doesn't have that. We can add the missing space to the first column by setting the flex basis property to 22 pixels. So together, flex grow, flex shrink, and flex basis form the cornerstone of what makes Flexbox flexible. Since these properties are so closely tied together, there's a handy shorthand property, flex, that lets you set all three. So you use it like this. So the first value is flex grow, the second value is flex shrink, and the third value is flex basis. One tricky thing you might notice is that I use 0 pixels for the flex basis instead of 0. And the reason why is because there's a bug in Internet Explorer 10 and 11 that ignores flex if the basis doesn't include a unit. So that's it. You've covered a ton of great stuff in this video, including flex grow, flex shrink, and flex basis. Plus, you've seen how these properties can be used to implement 12-column layouts. If you're looking for a challenge, try to finish off this entire grid. If you're still confused about how flex grow, flex shrink, and flex basis work, don't worry about it. We'll be covering them again in later videos, so you'll get a chance to review then. Until then, have fun.